Welcome back to the studio. I've upgraded my glasses from reading glasses to prescription, so I'm still trying to get used to that, wearing them all the time. And they're bifocals too, so. Today we're going to be working on the on-the-road quilt top. I had done this video once already. I did the whole video with the volume off, so we're going to be repeating the entire process, but on a different quilt top. So today we're going to finish up on the road. We had the trip all last summer with the different blocks, and I've got the border, inner border and outer border on it, and we're going to look at some of the different choices for quilting. That's really the main theme of the quilt today, because you've seen me do the input of the design on the software, but I wanted to talk a little bit about quilting choices. The quilt itself is, in a way, a novelty type quilt. It's got flowers and birds and love bugs and campers and things on it, so it's already a novelty quilt. There are on-the-road quilting patterns that have the love bug and the camper on them, and I've got the flowers as well, and I could certainly use that on there, but sometimes I think it's a little bit too much to use a novelty pattern on a novelty quilt. Not to say that it's wrong, it's just not exactly what I'm looking for. If I were using a solid fabric or a printed fabric with no designs on it, like maybe a plaid or just geometric, then the flowers or the campers could be really cute. But what I want to do is portray the idea of wind, or the wind blowing, or clouds, or air movement, because on the road you would be traveling. So I've picked out 3 different designs that I thought looked like some air movement. Oodles, Easy Peasy, and oddly enough, Thread. So we're going to look at those 3 quilt patterns on the tablet and see what those look like, and then we'll go ahead and input the design and the shape of the quilt and get it quilted. We always have to get to the size of the quilt before we can get to the designs. So I'm going to hit Design Sew Quilt, Start New. I'm going to erase the work in progress and erase it permanently and reset my clock. I'm going to select Pantograph, which is the same as an edge to edge or E to E. It's all the same thing. I'm going to enter the rectangle manually. So I've added 2 inches to the width and 2 inches to the length. So the size I'm going to put in is 48 wide and 62 inches high. And I'm going to hit finished. And now I'm going to select my quilt pattern. So I'm going to the Urban Elements catalog, and I'm going to get E for Easy Peasy. Here you can see that. So if I select it twice, you can see what the design looks like. I could go ahead and change the gap, and then go ahead and reduce the size again. Oh, I'm still on gap. And if I take this back down to the original size of the pattern, it doesn't really strike me as wind. It's giving me a different feeling. So I'm going to go ahead and back out of that one. The next one I'm going to try is, what was it? Oodles. So in the Urban catalog, I'll go to my O in the alphabet, and I'll pull up Oodles. I'm going to change the gap on that one, and then take the size back down. And again, it doesn't really strike me so much as wind. It's a little bit more frilly. So I'm going to go back out again to my Urban catalog and go to T for Threadz. This is an 8.5 inch design, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. change the gap. And now I'm going to go back to my pattern height and make that back to 8.5 inches. Doesn't really have to be exact. That's 8.524, and I'm going to go ahead and keep this one. This one is giving me the right scale for the piece, the actual shapes of the applique. I like the curls on it and the little bit of spacing, so I'm going to go ahead and hit finished. I'm going to keep that one. So I'm going to accept my transitions, and now I'm ready to sew quilt. Now I'm going to have to repeat this whole process because I had the head of the machine up in the center front just so it was a little bit easier to film. But if you program the quilting that way, it's going to think that this is the upper left-hand corner, which it's not. So I'll go ahead and repeat this process in the right place, and then we're going to go ahead and hit sew quilt and we can get sewing. As you can see, we have the machine started. We have re-input all the information that we originally had. So we're off and running on the stitching. Looks like this particular row is going to take 7 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let that sew out for a little bit. And after we get a couple rows done, we will bring you back in so you can see the design as it's stitching out on the applique. My main emphasis today really is on just the selection of the quilting pattern, choosing something that really complements the work that you've already done or that the person you're quilting for has already done. I like the scale of this particular pattern. What's really nice with doing digital work is that you can increase or decrease the size of a digital pattern so that it does complement the work and it makes sense to what the quilt is trying to say. I also like the idea with the both the flowers and the birds, but with the traveling camper, the love bug, the love RV, that this looks like a blowing wind or clouds, or just gives me the idea of wind in motion, which I think really complements this particular pattern. You can also see that I've used a low contrast or medium low contrast thread choice so that it doesn't overpower either the background or the applique itself. In my eye, when I look at it, the thread on the applique just disappears. It really is only in the background that I really see visually the impact of that. And most of the impact is texture here with a little bit of motion. So in this particular case, I'm very happy with the outcome of the design selection, the quilting selection with the quilt top itself. So I'm almost, I would say, more than half done on this particular quilt. I'm going to go ahead and roll up the quilt again and realign it, and I'll get stitching out a little bit more of this pattern. The pattern is called Threadz. Originally it was an 8.5 inch design, which is about how high I have it here. Just know also, if you're ordering paper pantos, Urban Elementz can upsize or downsize those for you, usually a couple inches in either direction, 2 inches bigger or 2 inches smaller, if that helps. And that's something you can do right on the website when you're ordering the paper panto. I think they charge you a couple dollars for it, but it's well worth it to have that done. One of the things I like to do as soon as I know what binding I'm going to use is to get the binding made before I even finish quilting. Sometimes I do it the very first day I do my cutting, if I'm pretty confident about what I'm going to use. Only because binding is not really my favorite part of the process, and I learned in school to swallow the frog, which simply means do your unfavorite part first. So I make my binding, and that way when it gets time to trim the quilt, I can just go ahead and put that binding on. So that is going to be the binding. I also cut fabric for the sleeve, and I've hemmed the one side. I can never hem both sides until I know the exact size of the quilt. So I have my sleeve fabric for the back, and I have my binding ready to go so that I can go ahead and get this finished up. So today basically we were talking just a little bit about quilting design, how to choose a quilting pattern, and a little bit about thread color. I really always like my quilting to be kind of like somebody's perfume or cologne. I only want to be aware of it when I get into the presence of the person or the quilt. If I could see it across the room, it's usually too loud for me. Same with perfume. If I could smell your perfume as soon as I walk in the room, that's a little bit too strong. So I like to use a low contrast thread unless the quilting is the main feature of that particular quilt. So this was Threadz by Patricia Ritter, available at the Urban Elementz website, as well as the On the Road quilt kit. This was originally sold as a block of the month, but it's no longer a block of the month in progress unless a quilt shop bought it and they distribute it in that way. But it is still available both for quilt shop, wholesale, or for retail purchase. It's a really beautiful quilt. Would be great for the camper or the RV, or for people who love to go camping and RVing. So thank you for joining me again today for this process. I'm going to go ahead and close for now, and we'll see you again next time. But until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other.